So this stumbled across my feed the other day, and I was absolutely floored and fascinated by it. So Irony here is also known on YouTube as the Funky Academic, and he's done many appearances on Crystal and Sagar's show. He's a very interesting character, very thoughtful character. He says, just got a 7-day Facebook ban for quoting the Declaration of Independence. And you can see there it says, this is because you previously posted something that didn't follow our community standards. This post goes against our standards on hate speech, so no one else can see it. So you can see what it said. This is supposed to be hate speech, they say. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. And then he says, remember, those domestic insurrections were slave revolts. It looks like in context it's slave revolts and like Native Americans fighting back. But he quoted the Declaration of Independence and they said, this is hate speech, we need to pull it down. So in other words, you can't openly and honestly discuss the history of the United States of America without getting banned. This is political correctness run amok. This is cancel culture run amok. And by the way, hate to say I told you so, but this is what we warned you about. We warned you that once you open the door to censorship and deplatforming and policing speech, it's the slipperiest slippery slope imaginable. The second you open the door, you're already at the bottom of the slope. Because then everybody's going to point the finger at everybody else, and the standards are going to be applied without context, without perspective. You know, you ban some far-right people who are crazy, and then they turn around and say you got to ban Antifa, and Twitter did ban a lot of big Antifa accounts when that happened. This is Facebook, of course, but look, this is what happens. You honestly, directly quote the Founding Fathers, and they're like, that's clearly hate speech, and they pull it down. So even in the context of discussing history, you can't do it? Well, then you have to sanitize everything. Everything. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. And by the way, I know the right likes to make this their main thing. They flip out whenever some right-winger is banned for saying something. Where are you now? I thought you guys were against cancel culture. I thought you guys were against censorship. This is clear cancel culture and censorship and violates all notions of freedom of speech, and I don't hear anybody talking about it. Why? Because he's quoting a politically incorrect part of the Declaration of Independence. That kind of shows a lot of our founders were dyed-in-the-wool bigots, And that's one of those things where if you say it in right-wing circles, that's cancelable. They get super triggered by some facts about our history. Now, by the way, I'm not... I actually think this cuts in both directions in the sense that it is true that the 1619 Project had a bunch of factual inaccuracies in it. And so the right sort of pounced on those factual inaccuracies. So the idea is oftentimes on the left, things are portrayed maybe even overly negative about our past. And they don't want to talk about any of the real positives of the United States of America. But on the right, they want to do the opposite and only talk about the positive shit. And so it's very difficult to find a very open, honest, objective telling of the history of this country. Because, there's a lot of good and a lot of bad. Obviously, talk about the Native American genocide and slavery and segregation and Jim Crow and nuking Japanese civilians. All these things are terrible. Iraq War, list goes on and on. When we rose to become the next imperialist nation, a lot of these things are terrible, but then also you have to balance it with the good stuff. You have to balance it with conversation about the First Amendment and freedom of speech and case law on that front in the United States of America. You have to balance it with the civil rights movement and our heroes during that era. You have to balance it with the war on poverty and the New Deal, and oftentimes you get a very biased picture no matter where you go. But what I'm seeing here is a scandal that now, this is what happens. Now we have private corporations who can police the entire political discourse of our nation. Because I got news for you, it happens all online now. This is the new public square. It is Facebook. It is Twitter. It is all these various large social media outlets. That's where the public discourse is happening now. That's where it's happening. So if that's going to be the public square, then we need to expand the First Amendment treat it as a public utility and regulate these outlets like public utilities. And the only time you could really get banned or deplatformed or anything needs to be for direct threats of violence or doxing or things of that nature. So, yeah. There you have it. Now, oh, by the way, I actually just got this message literally right before I came on air. Apparently, so he appealed once. I think they slapped it down. Then he appealed again, and they finally flipped it and said, okay, you're fine. And I think maybe one of the reasons why they flipped it is because we were all tweeting about it, and it kind of blew up a little bit. And so, I tweeted about it, Crystal Ball tweeted about it. It took off a little bit, and so it was reversed after the pressure. But this is what I'm talking about. This is classic big social media outlet. They do something fucked up. Somebody appeals. If they have no power, they're like, fuck off. We're right about it. But then if they can get the thing to take off and show how absurd it is, then they're like, oh, did we say that then? No, we're going to reverse the thing. This is exactly what happened with Right Wing Watch. Right Wing Watch was banned. They appealed. They were banned on YouTube. And then they appealed. YouTube said, no, we made the right decision. And then it blew up and all these different media outlets reported on it. And then they were like, it was a mistake. We're gonna unban him right now. Don't worry about it. We're going to unban him right now. If you think this system is defensible, you're dead wrong.